Good morning, everybody. So just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to go through in this session here. Talk about the promotional process and the job sample test, and a little bit about an overview of what's involved, why we put it in place, some of the benefits. We're going to talk a bit about the different components of the job sample test, including in-basket, situational judgment test, and then writing exercise, and talk a little bit then about key copy and scoring and banding, because there's going to be some changes there, and I want to make sure everyone understands that. And then finally, we'll have the chance to ask some questions. And I found that when we did a presentation like this, when we implemented this on the sergeant promotional exam, we got some really good questions and actually got some suggestions out of one of the sessions that we incorporated into the testing process. So please ask questions or make suggestions. Important point, we have a subject matter expert team working right now on developing the lieutenant promotional exam process. We are quite a bit of the way through on the written test. We have not started on the job sample test yet. So as a consequence, there could be some changes in focus, and it would be getting to a level of detail that I probably couldn't share with you anyhow because it's confidential test material. But a lot of it comes down to the judgments of our subject matter expert panel. If you've talked to anybody who took the job sample test for the sergeant promotional exam, this is going to be similar, but I would expect it to be a bit more complex than for a sergeant because of the higher rank. So why did we change the promotional process? Brian mentioned a little bit about that. There's been some issues with the AP for years and years, and I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody. A bit of a confusion over what are the goals and purpose of the performance evaluation versus the AP. The rating process is very subjective. Very lenient scores. The average, as Brian said, is in the high 90s and almost no variability in scores. So it really doesn't capture people's capabilities. It's not really doing anything for us in the sense of helping differentiate between who is more qualified and who's less qualified. A big piece of why we wanted to get rid of it is that if a manager rates according to the standards, that is perceived as disadvantaging his or her folks. And because if everyone else is not doing that, then those folks are basically getting the short end of the stick. And then also the appeals are very costly, time-consuming, and no one likes them when we're done with it anyhow. The structured interview has also had its share of issues. We have had to create multiple interview forms for obvious reasons. And with the dual track, we're also creating a set of multiple interviews for custody and for patrol. So a lot of staff time and subject matter expert time went into developing all those materials. Again, the ratings were pretty lenient, low to mid 90s. Again, very little variability in scores. And because the scores are so constrained, it doesn't really capture people's capabilities. The last time we did interviews, we actually went into an extended review process where we used live interviewers, followed up by a video review. Another panel watched the same video, did blind ratings. We compared them. If there was certain score ranges, we would either have a third panel come in and do a rating, or those two panels would get together and talk about the ratings. So it was very labor intensive. In spite of all that, it was still, we still had a fair number of appeals, and so we thought there needed to be a better way of moving forward on this. So the process that we're going forward with now is almost purely objectively scored. Probably 3/4 of it are scored by scanner, so there's no way human judgment gets involved. The part that does involve judgment is done blind, so the people who are doing the ratings on the writing sample don't know the candidate's name. So we've taken care of any possibility of any kind of bias one way or another. A big advantage to this also is we can do the assessments, the job sample test in one day, whereas with the interview, we were running interviews for a week and a half or so and having to go find a hotel somewhere. It's a big effort that Gabby and her staff had to put on. And obviously this is going to be much less disruption to operations. Taking that many high-ranking people away from the department for 2 weeks was, it's not good for the department. So our proposed promotional process looks like this. The written test is going to be fairly similar to things we've seen in the past, and again, that will be pass-fail like it's been before. The job sample test is the piece that is new for a lieutenant, and it basically presents work-related situations and scenarios, and then you're asked how you would handle these situations. They're mostly multiple choice kinds of questions, and so they're going to be very similar to the kind of things that were done for 2014 and 2015 sergeant exam. And while this kind of process is relatively new for LASD, these types of tests are used in other law enforcement agencies. I know a number of federal agencies and agencies in other states are using things like our situational judgment test. So again, there's 3 separate but related sections here that make up this overall job sample test. The first is what we call an in-basket. You might have heard of in-basket, in-tray, that sort of thing. Situational judgment test and a writing exercise. And these will simulate important aspects of the work done by lieutenants. So just in terms of what to expect when you take one of these, we plan for it to run about 2.5 hours in length. And we provide the in-basket and situational judgment test materials all at the same time. It's really important to follow instructions. And one of the first things I would recommend is that you read the instructions and you kind of scan through all the papers in the in-basket before you start trying to answer any questions. I've seen some people come in and just try to start answering questions right away, and you need to kind of get yourself situated, get yourself understand everything that you're looking at. Something that we're doing in the sergeant exam as well as this one is we're providing new information that comes in during the test session. So we'll actually have either an audio announcement or a brief video clip playing, and it's going to be something that bears on maybe something that's in the in-basket, or it may be related to the writing exercise that we have to do. So when we have this information coming in, it's important to take notes. If you happen to be out of the room, going to the restroom, for example, we do have provisions made for people to be able to hear a message they might have missed. But I would encourage you not to leave for the first half hour or so, because we tend to put them more in the early part. We don't put them real late in the session. Again, we're going to have separate and unique assessments for custody and patrol. Obviously, there'll be some overlap in terms of the kind of things we deal with, but they're going to be focused more on those particular tracks. If you're a dual track candidate, unfortunately, that means that you take both of these, so it's a lot for one day. There will be downtime between the first session and the second session, but they would be both done the same day. Okay, so some benefits here. I think this is a very representative of the kind of work that's going to be done on the job. And again, it's mostly going to be scored by scanner, so that's objective. There's no way a judgment gets involved with how someone is going to score. We estimate that this is going to save the department, save the department roughly $500,000 in labor, materials, facilities, et cetera, compared to the interview. And just, as I said, a lot less disruptions to operations rather. Again, this allows us to evaluate multiple competencies that are needed for the job, and again, all in one setting. So just a little bit about what it looks like. We literally do have a manila envelope with a bunch of pieces of paper in it. That's the in-basket, and there's a separate questionnaire that has a situational judgment test. We will have an answer sheet that is scannable, and that answer sheet also, the way we set it up, ties into your writing sample. So you don't write your name on the scoring sheet for the writing sample. We have a unique identifier that we put together via computer. So people who score your paper don't know whose paper it is. So let's talk about the in-basket. Again, you're going to get a packet of documents. They're going to be stuffed in an envelope like this. there's going to be varying levels of importance, and you all know that if you go through your in-basket, either paper or online, you're going to find some stuff in there that is just not important. There will be some stuff that's here that's not important, and there will also be stuff that is important, and it's really your decisions in terms of how much importance you place on things and how you handle them. Again, additional information could come in that might bear on the in-basket, and that's something to keep in mind then as you are trying to answer these questions. Okay, as I've mentioned, additional information comes in once. We don't repeat it, but we do have a laptop set up at the back of the room, so you'd be able to make up that if you're at the restroom or something. The in-basket booklet, there's going to be basically a set of questions that goes along with that package of materials that we're providing. And again, these are multiple choice questions. They're not open-ended. So the kind of things that could be here, and none of these should be a surprise, I wouldn't think, depending on the job and the role. Examples could be citizen complaints, crime statistics, email or telephone messages from either direct reports or a boss, memos requiring action, maybe there's employee or personnel problems, there could be union-related concerns, and less important materials. So it's important that you put yourself in the role of lieutenant when you're answering these questions. So assume you are a lieutenant as you answer all the questions, review the documents and any additional information, and then decide how to handle the situation. There's a number of courses of action provided on each one of the in-basket questions. Things you might do would be, what's the priority of things? Identifying problems and fixing things in maybe somebody's report or something like that, handling an employee or citizen complaint, delegating things to someone else. Again, though, all the questions are multiple choice, and the way these are set up, there's not necessarily a right answer and a wrong answer. It's not like a multiple choice test. Some answers are going to be better than others. You may be able to come up with better answers or actions on your own, but this is the way this is structured. You can't do that here. So you have to pick the best of what's provided, even though you might be able to do something better. Okay, so the situational judgment test is another major component. And the situational judgment test basically provides people with a situation, some kind of a scenario, and then asks what you would do. And so this is very much like the kind of questions we used to ask in the structured interview, where you're given a scenario, how would you handle the situation? Except in this case, we're providing a number of different scenarios in terms of how you could respond. Again, these questions are developed by our subject matter experts. We're using a process called critical incidents, which is different than the critical incident that you might think of in more of a police context. And here we're talking about job-related events that help identify positive and ineffective ways of handling particular situations. So these questions are all job-related scenarios, and you have to choose, again, from the options that are provided. You can't make up other ways to handle them. One thing that's very different here on this kind of test compared to your more typical multiple choice is that in some cases it's possible to get partial credit. So multiple choice questions are typically right or wrong. On these, we have in some cases given full credit, partial credit, no credit. This makes the key copy review process very complicated, and we're going to discuss that a bit more. It really puts some limitations on what you can realistically do during the key copy process. So this is a sample scenario. Let's just read that for a second. And let's just do a show of hands. How many of you think that A is the best approach? Okay, nobody. How about B? How about C? Okay. And how about D? So you can see there that just based on the consensus of the room, most of you were picking C, no one's picking A or B. That's basically the kind of process we're going through here, and I'll explain a little bit how about we come up with the scoring key. One other thing I would just caution you here is that because we haven't developed this particular situational judgment test yet, I'm not exactly clear which approaches we're going to use in terms of answering questions. One example would be identify the best answer like I just showed you. Another format says pick the best answer and pick the worst answer. And then another one is rate the effectiveness of every answer. So as an example, if you have a scenario and 5 alternatives, you would rate how effective each one of those approaches would be to handling that scenario. So a real advantage of that kind of approach is we're collecting a lot more information in a short period of time. And we have used all of those formats in the past. I'm not exactly clear what we're going to use on this one because we haven't built it yet. Okay, the writing sample. Again, we don't know what's going to be in this exactly. On the Sergeant, we had people writing some kind of a memo and using information that's either in the test package itself or coming in as part of an audio or video clip. It could be summarizing information, making recommendations, suggesting next steps, and so on. There is no expectation that you know all the formal requirements of a department. Let's say it was a chief's memo or something like that. Required notifications, we're not going to be scoring it on those sorts of things. So don't feel like you need to go in and understand exactly what would be required for different kinds of memos. Now, one thing on the writing sample I want to make clear, we have to test everybody at one time. I would love to be able to have people type their answers or type their memo into a computer, but because we're testing everybody at once, it's not really feasible for us to assemble 400 or 500 computers in one room at a convention center to do this kind of process. If we attempted to do it in smaller groups, then we would be back into the kind of problem where we'd need multiple forms of the situational judgment test and InBat and so on. That's really not in the cards because this is too complex. The interviews were tough enough, this would be too much. So the best compromise we have here is that you have to handwrite a memo. If you're not used to writing by hand, probably be a good idea to just do a little writing to make sure you can still do it, because mostly we type anymore. I'm the same way. Okay, the scoring is done on the writing exercise is done by sworn personnel. This will be captains and commanders. Again, blind review. We tie it in with the code that is on your answer sheet, so nobody knows whose paper they're scoring. We train the people before we do the writing exercise, and then before we actually do the scoring, we do what's called a calibration exercise. So we will pick one of the memos at random, have everybody read the same memo, everybody scores the same memo, we post all the ratings on a whiteboard, and we talk about any places where people disagree. And we do that during the training process as well. So we're paying a lot of attention to consistency in scoring here. Again, we have 2 people scoring each memo. If they fall within a certain range of points, we just average them together. If they are too many points apart, we have a third person come in and grade the same memo, and you get the 2 highest sets of scores. So we could make it more consistent, but we're erring on the side of giving you guys the benefit of the doubt on the score. And just for comparison purposes, on the last sergeant exam we did, only about 8% of the memos required a third person to come in and do the scoring. So it's not a huge number, not a big inconsistency. Okay, the in-basket and situational judgment test scoring, we have over 20 subject matter experts, roughly 10 custody, 10 patrol, that are developing all the materials and the questions. We also have them review all the questions, and they rate the relative effectiveness of every one of the answers, and that is what becomes a scoring key. So this scoring is based on the collective judgment of all of these subject matter experts. And so I just want to emphasize, you can't find the answer to most of these in a manual, in a policy manual. Understanding of policy is going to help you in terms of answering some of the questions, but these questions are not based on policy directly like the written test questions are. Okay. Now the scores on the different sections get combined together into one overall score. And this presentation is going to be available for you as well, so don't worry about writing the weights down. We're basically putting 25% on the in-basket, 50% on the situational judgment test, and 25% on the writing sample. Again, these are estimated. We have to do a little bit more work with our SMEs, but these are the weights we have used with Sargent, and it seemed to work pretty well. Now, one thing I want to point out that's very important, we don't have a passing score on any one of these sections. We are just converting all these scores and then adding them together. So there's no passing score on any section of the job sample test, and there's no passing score on the overall job sample test. That score gets combined with your written test score for banding purposes. So let's talk about scoring and banding. I've mentioned how this all plays in. Brian had mentioned that we have done a lot to tighten up security over the years, and consequently we don't have people scoring close to 100% on the written test anymore, and we don't have people scoring close to 100% on the in-basket situational judgment test. And so we have been doing, in effect, kind of a curving now, where, as an example, on the written test, if the highest score is an 89%, we might treat that as 100% and use that as the basis for calculating percentages for everyone else who passed on that test. So that means that if you know what your percentage score is originally, you don't know what your actual score would be for banding purposes, because we are going to be doing some adjustments there. We're very likely to make those kinds of adjustments on the job sample test, just like we do on the written test. These are not the kind of tests where all the scores stack up at the 100, like on the AP, and at the 95 on the interview. We have much more of a spread of scores. So because these adjustments have to be made once we have all the scores put together, it's very difficult for you to estimate what your overall banded score would be. So that is why I'm bringing this up for key copy. In the written test, it is possible in key copy to have a good idea what your overall score was, at least in terms of number correct, percent correct, that sort of thing, although you wouldn't know what the adjusted score would be. One part I'd emphasize here is on the job sample test, that's the key copy is your only chance to review material, but you will not be able to score your job sample test with any great degree of accuracy because of this complicated scoring approach. It's all done by computer. Even if you could score it, it would not agree with what the final scoring is, the final banding, because of the adjustments we will make looking across everybody. And again, we can only make these adjustments after everything is scored and we put all the scores together for all candidates. So some questions, and I'm sure there's other things that we can think of, but how should you prepare for the job sample test? One that I'd mentioned already is, I think, just trying to practice doing a little writing by hand just to get back into it. Understand the major duties and functions of watch commander in custody and patrol if you're applying for both. If that means talking to somebody who does the job, asking if you could sit with them, that sort of thing would probably be helpful as well. Oh, and one other thing. If you do an online search, you can find preparatory guides for situational judgment tests. If you do a search for situational judgment tests, you can find a bunch of things online that will give you some ideas about how to approach the questions. Again, it depends on how we're asking you to answer the question, whether it's pick the best or rate the effectiveness of all of them, but you can get some ideas from going online. Okay, so kind of a summary here. This is going to simulate a lot of on-the-job functions. It's going to be presenting a number of work-related scenarios and situations, and you're going to be asked how you would handle the situation. There's 3 separate but related sections: the in-basket with the documents and questions, the SJT questions, and then the writing sample. Again, the scoring is much more objective than in the past. The bulk of this is machine scored. The written test is all machine scored. The in-basket is machine scored. and the situational judgment test is machine scored. The only piece that is scored by humans is the rating on the writing sample, and again, that is blind scored. So I can't make it any more objective than this, I don't think. So at this point, I would turn it over to questions.
On the writing part of it.
I'm sorry?
On the writing part of it?
Yes, the writing
I
part.
think we're all used to writing everything in capitals when we write. Is that going to matter whether it's lowercase or?
It will not matter if it's upper
Just
or uppercase. I know that a lot of times that you do everything in capitals, so that's fine.
I just wanted the content at the end of that set.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. What else?
Questions.
Yes.
Earlier at the beginning, you guys mentioned that a lot of people are using this, and this is a validated process. So has this been validated for our department?
Yes. All the exams that we're doing like this have been validated. That's why we've got myself and my staff working on these projects. We all have specialized training in industrial organizational psychology. We are doing an extensive job analysis, and then all this is tied together, and it's all documented in a technical report. So yes, it's all validated. Okay. Other questions? Yes.
In regards to the multiple choice questions and the scoring, if the 2016 cohort of people taking the test pick C, for example, does that mean that because the majority selected that's going to be the appropriate answer, or has that been predetermined?
On that one, that's just a sample that we made up, so.
I understand, but
Yeah.
I mean in terms of the scoring of the test, if everybody takes a test and a particular question comes up and the overall group says A is the answer, is it predetermined, or is that determined at the time that everyone says A is appropriate?
The question is really about how we predetermine the key. And what we do is we have all of our subject matter experts independently rate the effectiveness of every one of the options on every one of the questions. And then we do some statistics, and if there's too much disagreement among our SMEs in terms of how effective each one of those alternatives are, we throw it out. But it is all predetermined before we go into the test.
So then when, at the very end of it then, when we get into the highest score, when we do this curve in theory, if there was a disagreement at that particular point, then that would go ahead and correct that variance.
I'm not sure I understand the last part.
If a particular question, which they aggregate, and you have the group says, and it doesn't agree per se with what was key.
Right.
When it's scored at the very end, in theory, the cohort would have gotten that question wrong. So we would curve it at the very end to come up with whatever those disagreements are.
I think what would be more likely to happen if we had a question work that way is we throw the question out. Quite honestly, we can't pilot test all the materials, so we have to put in more questions than we need, knowing that some may not work appropriately. That happens on the written test as well as something like this. So if we have a problem, we would throw those questions out. Yeah, Gabby.
Well, I was going to say, do you want to talk about protest? And when you do the review?
Yeah, that would be great.
Concerns, right? That would be.
Yeah, why don't you come on up and we'll talk about protest review. This is Gabby Orozco. She manages the sworn exams unit, and she used to work in my staff before she went over there. So.
Good morning, everybody. So I think the way I understand your question is if most of us pick the same answer, right? But the keyed answer is different, what will happen, or how is that handled? So after you take the test, we provide you 10 business days to file a protest, correct? So if there's any concerns at that time that may be raised, even if it isn't, Dr. Hoffman and his staff do what it's called an item analysis review. So they look at the items, and if all of you guys pick C, but the right answer is D, like he said, they either throw it out, or right, or you guys would give credit.
Or maybe we give credit for 2 answers. We've done that as well.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah. That
Okay.
helps.
Okay.
Ask her some questions. Talk about the protest.
Say that again.
How you handle the protest and those sorts of things.
As far as filing a protest, or
Well-
How do you protest the second part of it?
the second part of it, the job sample test?
How do you read that? If he says there's no correct answer until the very end, so how do you read it if you only have 10 days?
Well, I mean, if you guys take the test, you guys usually take the test on a Saturday.
Okay.
Immediately after you guys take the test, we always hear, there's always one question that's always buzzing around or something. So you guys have an idea, question number 9, there was something wrong with that. Or so we give you 10 days to put that in a form, submit it to us, right? There's a form that we provide for you. So you submit it to us, and then Dr. Hoffman and his staff does the review of that. But independently, even if someone doesn't bring something to our attention through a protest, he does a review of all the items just to make sure of how they were functioning. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if he sees a question where majority of the people taking the test got it wrong,
Yes,
then there's a possibility he would throw it out or give 2 answers
that's correct.
without
So-
any protest.
Yes. So even though, let's just say nobody protested number 10, he's still going to look at that. He has to. It's what we, I used to be in Tesla, it's what we do, so. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so in this protest, we're basically talking about an appeal, right?
No, the appeal comes after we promulgate results, final results, and the appeals are handled by DHR. Protest is what we allow you to file a protest or say, there was something wrong, I think that the right answer was C, and you said it was D, and you provide documentation to support that. You submit it within those 10 business days, and that's when Dr. Hoffman and his staff take a look at it. Now, appeals is after we give you your final exam results and we banned you, and you file those appeals with DHR. And those appeals, and it's interesting because for the written test, we provide you a key copy, right? So if there's any concerns about the test, those are filed through the protest. Again, with the job sample test, we also offer you a key copy, so we also allow you the opportunity to file a protest. After results are banded, you can still grieve if you don't feel that your score was accurate. You can file an appeal, and that goes through DHR. So, yes.
Local will help you, any candidate, either file a protest after this exam or the final appeal. So you can just call our office and we'll help you draft that protest or appeal.
Yes.
Will we know the score for all 3 components or of the JST, or will it be just one overall score?
It'll be one score. Yes.
I saw on the slide earlier, it's kind of a little off. You said the written test is going to be pass-fail. Is there not going to be an 89%, 95%? It's just a straight, you either pass it or you fail it?
Oh, well, no, it's pass-fail in the sense that if you don't get a high enough score, you don't go on to the job sample test.
But the better you do on the written,
the better you'll do in the banding.
Okay.
So yes, it's to your advantage to study and do well on the written test. Other questions?
So when you
Yes.
talked about curving, you were referencing both the written curve and this subject job test?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We've done that on both both the sergeant exams where we've implemented this. We did some adjustment on the written test, and then we also did an adjustment for the overall banding at the very end after we combined it with the job sample test score. Other questions? Yes,
How many people are taking the test on each side, if you know?
Gabby, that's a Gabby question.
Oh, I just had those numbers this afternoon. You guys are definitely a smaller group, but I think we have about 100 and something for custody only. Now, those are the ones that filed. We're doing review to make sure you meet the selection requirements. So as far as filing, we have about 100 and something for custody, 200 and something for patrol only, and about 400 or so for dual. And one thing I wanted to bring up, if you file for the 2 exams for custody and patrol or dual, remember that for the job sample test, you're there all day because you'll take the one in the morning, whether it's patrol or custody, and we give you a bit of a break, right? And then you'll come back for the second one, whether that's patrol or custody, because I think there was some confusion where people were saying, well, I thought it was always in the morning, or I only have to take one. It's not like the written. This one is patrol only, and then in the afternoon we do the custody or patrol, whatever it is that we end up doing. So please plan on being there the whole day. Yes?
Do you guys choose what one we take first? Like say we are dual track, but we want to take the patrol one
Yes.
first, so we're fresh and awake.
Yes, we do.
You guys choose what one?
Yes.
Probably flip a coin.
Yes, to make it fair.
It's not combined like the sergeant was?
It's not combined like the sergeant, no.
So what about the fatigue and the stress factor for those in the dual compared to those that's taking strictly one exam?
We've never had that problem.
We-
This is new, so.
Yeah, we haven't had
So
the,
because it's not, you know, if you're taking two tests and one person's only taking one, they may essentially score better because now you have the fatigue factor and those that take the two exams in that same day.
I understand that. I also could think of people who do better because they have experience on the first one and they are more comfortable on the second one. So we haven't had an issue of people complaining about being too tired. We haven't had an issue of people not being able to finish in the amount of time allowed. We are allowing plenty of time here, so.
I was gonna say, you are allowed about 2.5 hours, and most people finish before that, so.
So when you take the first one though, you have to wait until the full 2.5 is over, plus the break at the start?
Yes.
If you're taking both tests, when is the review process for each test?
I was just gonna bring that up.
You mean the key copy?
Yes.
Okay, so for the job sample test, because it is, and it's, I hate to say it's a long day, but usually we're done about 4, I think. But it's, we can't have the key copy after that. I mean, you've had people that have been there since 7 in the morning, and then now you have to wait because we have to turn around the room and set it up. So we've been offering it on a Wednesday or a Tuesday the following week. So we will provide you with more information on that, but it won't be the same day as the job sample test.
So
Yes.
then the 10 days will start after that, after the key copy?
Yes.
Okay.
And forgive me because I haven't done dual track stuff before, but, so the day of the written, how exactly does that look? Is there a test that combines both custody and patrol, or is it another long day?
No, so the written test is, if you're doing dual track, you will be in one room and you will have one book and it has all the questions. It has all the questions for custody, all the questions for patrol, and all the questions that everybody takes, or what we call core, right? So shared. In another room, we have the single track. So on one side of the room you have patrol, and the other side of the room you have custody. And that's how it works. Now, once you're done with the test, you can go home or you can wait for key copy. So. Yes?
If you sign, and it probably won't happen a lot, but if you signed up for both, you said you're gonna dictate which test you're gonna take first. So, okay, you're taking the custody test on the dual track written, you say, no, I'm opting out of that, I just wanna go patrol, that's an option, right?
You're talking about the written test?
If you
or-
signed up for dual track,
Right, so,
at the date of the test, can you opt out of custody?
yes, you can. Yes. Yeah, so we do have a number of candidates that decide last minute, you know what, I just want to do patrol, or I just want to do custody. We ask you to go to the notices table, fill out a notice, because it will be different than the one you got in mail or email. And so then you'll just report to the room for the track that you've decided to take. And with that, please check your email. We are going paperless. So we're sending out, all JDICs are going out through email as well. Your notices and written test results all go out through email. So please check your email, and they all go to the email that you provided in your application.
I have a final question myself. The personnel that you train to rate the test, are they department members, or
Yep.
if they are, in their particular rank?
Captains and commanders, yes, and they're trained. We go through about a 3-hour training program with a lot of practice rating, and then we also do that calibration exercise the morning when we actually do the scoring again, so yes. Yeah, Brian?
I have a couple of requests, because I think the fatigue factor is an interesting one that was brought up. I request that you guys do an analysis of those who take a dual and those who take a single to see whether fatigue played into it, or whether there's an advantage to maybe taking the dual, having taken that exam over another person. That's my first request. And the second one, When you guys do look at the protests, I think you mentioned that your staff takes a look at that?
Yes.
That you include your subject matter experts in that review?
Oh, yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah, we do a review just from a statistical perspective, but in terms of the content, we have to have our SMEs involved in that.
Great.
Yes.
On the written part, the essay, the writing sample.
Yes.
You said that notifications and stuff like that aren't required.
Yeah, we're not going to be worried about that.
What basically will you be judging us on then?
Well, I can tell you on the sergeant, all we were really looking at is things like, did they follow directions? Did they provide some critical information that we were looking for? And things like punctuation and grammar and organization and clarity and those sorts of things, more writing and mechanics. On this one, I think it's going to be a bit more complex, and we may get into some things like judgment and decision-making or analysis, as well as the writing piece. Because this is a higher level job, we would expect more challenging writing assignment. But that's, again, the exact details haven't developed it yet, so. Yes?
So because we are in an age of computer, and the computer pretty much proofreads our stuff with regards to grammar and even sentence structure. So now that we don't have a computer, how much is that going to be weighed on our grammar, structure, spelling, things of that nature?
Yeah, well, a couple things. Spell check, I don't ever trust it. I also teach part-time, and I have a poem I give to my students called Ode to a Spell Checker, and it's full of everything that is incorrect, and Word pushes it right through and says there's nothing wrong with it. So I don't trust spell checkers at all. I don't really trust grammar checkers either. That being said, spelling is only going to account for maybe about 10% of the writing sample score, so it's not a huge piece. That's not the major concern that we're looking at there. 10% of 25%. So think of it in those terms. 2%. 2%. Other questions? Last call. Yes.
The subject matter experts, who do they consist of, and how reliable is it that they are not going to be the next question?
That's a very good question. I can tell you that the department has been paying a lot of attention to identifying subject matter experts more than it has in the past, probably. And we really go out of our way in terms of how we handle all the materials to maintain control. No one takes anything out of the rooms when we're writing anything. As Brian mentioned, we have taken all of our sworn tests off of the network. We have our own standalone server, and so we maintain control that way. I can talk about the things that Gabby and her staff have done to tighten up security. We use an external printer. We don't have the copy made in-house anymore. Once it's printed, it's sealed. The boxes are sealed with evidence tape, and they're sealed in the cabinets in my office that has an alarm, and we go on and on. A hard lid on the room so no one can get in through the ceiling. We're taking it very seriously. Yes.
When do you anticipate that presentation will be available?
Sometime next week.
And just to add with the SMEs, to get back specifically what you're asking, is that's one of the main emphasis. The captain goes and explains to them confidentiality on this is at the utmost of the security with it. They sign a form acknowledging and with all the parameters about the confidentiality with that. So that's something that's emphasized, that's something that's looked at when we select who the SMEs are, because we don't want that information shared. We've gone through all these extents to keep this as fair and equitable as possible. We don't want it to be upset by one person sharing information.
Yeah, Brian.
Sorry to keep asking questions, but on the additional information part, which is kind of unique,
Yeah.
where something pops up and you get additional information, you only get one shot at that, correct? From what I saw in the previous exam. So I just wanted to clarify that if you wanted to, you cannot go to the back of the room where you have the ability to listen to it again.
No.
If you wanted to hear it again.
Yeah, if
One shot.
you've got the one shot, so you should take notes. We've had, the first time we did the sergeant, we had a number of people said, oh, well, and they just keep going, and they didn't write anything down. So it's important to follow the directions and take some notes. Yeah.
So on that part of it, I'm a little hard of hearing.
It's also, we put
Is it gonna
the,
be a speaker, is it gonna be headphones, what's it gonna be?
we have it audio, and we also have the words printed on a screen and projected, so you can read it too. We have belt and suspenders. Yes,
It's a word for word and not a summary?
a word for word, yes.
How many questions are on the dual?
Are you talking about the job sample test, or are you talking about the written?
The written.
Off the top of my head, I would say there would be roughly around 150 total. And then some of those would be core, and then some would be patrol only, and some would be custody.
How about the job sample test?
Don't know yet.
Oh.
It's not even a glimmer in my eye yet, so I don't know.
So
Yes.
then each individual track test for patrol and custody is each 75 questions then?
No, it'd be closer probably to 100 or so. Because there's a core section that goes across both, and then a custody section and patrol section. So we just, if you're taking custody only, you would take the core section, and then the custody questions, patrol only, the core section and the patrol sections. Yes.
Is all of it recall, or is there still an open book?
We got rid of the open book component, so it's all recall.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, well, I appreciate all the questions, and feel free to contact me if you have any others. Thank you.